Greetings and welcome to the UC San Diego AI Alumni Council webinar series. Today, we focus on companies getting ROI from their AI initiatives with our guest speaker, George Scott, president of SIDEARM Sports. Hi, everyone. I am Sandra Peterson, founding chair of the council and CEO of Sandstone Partners, an AI advisory firm. I've been involved with AI since 2014 with roots in Silicon Valley and experience with Apple, NVIDIA, and several startups. And I am beyond thrilled with what's going on in AI today. All right, for context, today's session is part of the Council's Foundation series, which brings 3 distinct perspectives every month. We kick off each quarter with the AI Meets Life theme, where we curate surprising and hopefully inspiring ways that AI is already affecting the world around us. We find uses that are not the obvious front page daily news. And in the past, we've featured Qualcomm, carbon robotics, weight cap, and push press. And then the second month of every quarter, we select UCSD student teams to bring fresh ideas to present their projects to industry, with a focus on projects that have real-world application potential. And then today, we close Q2 with our focus on the industry ROI theme, where we feature AI live in action at organizations. And in the first quarter, we had 10 ROI cases in kind of rapid fire style. But today we're doing a deep dive into one company's initiative. So we'll start with a few council updates. And then we'll dive into SIDEARM Sports' AI journey, where President George Scott led a full cross-company AI initiative. He's going to cover the journey so far, including their 6-phase playbook, real use examples, lessons learned, and the impact across the company. Then we'll wrap up with Q&A. And a couple housekeeping notes. We are recording this, so you'll receive the recording, and we encourage you to share that with colleagues, friends, family. And we encourage your questions. So to submit a question, if you move your cursor, a Zoom control bar will come up and there's a Q&A button. If not, you can click the ... menu icon of more and you'll see Q&A there. Enter your questions anytime and we'll get to them at the end. And with that, I will hand it over to Brian Baumgartner, our co-chair for council updates.
Hey everyone, Brian here, the co-chair for the council. Same old story, scan that QR code. You can get all of our upcoming events, information, access to the LinkedIn group, just all the good stuff in one place. So I will belabor this slide slightly so that you have more time to pull out your phone and scan the QR code, but take a look there and get in touch with us in all the different ways possible so you know what's going on. Speaking about what's going on, in July we have, Sandra just kind of described, our next series in the cycle here. So AI Meets Life, Handshake and Data Bricks. You can read the snippet here, but it should be a really good conversation about how LLMs are improving human work and how it's laying the groundwork for kind of even better use of AI in the future. So it should be a really good one. If you're using AI at all, you're using these AI models. So come check this webinar out, get signed up for it as soon as you can. Again, scan that QR code. That will help you get more information there and get signed up so you don't miss it. And then in August, we know a lot of people are out for summer. So we're going to have our open meeting. It's an annual meeting that we do where we invite people to come join us and talk about the club, let us know what you'd like to see more of, give us feedback, help us plan things coming up. Basically just get more involved. If you weren't aware, but even if you are, we had the survey that came out recently. So we'll go over the summary of that information and what we learned from that. And then we'll also talk about upcoming events, brainstorm how we're going to tackle them and do all that stuff. So everyone's welcome to that. We'll have more to say at the August meeting, so we hope to see you there. All right, I think I've delayed long enough on this that people can scan the QR code. We've also got it again if you need it. I already mentioned this, but that's all the things you can find on the QR code. And then, all good, Sandra. And then this is our leadership team, which we show you every time. We don't usually belabor the point because you kind of get the idea, but this time we have something to show you right in the center of the slide there. We do have an open position on the leadership team. We're looking for a secretary and communications lead. This is the person who helps us get the word out about our seminars that are coming up, help us communicate with all of you all, and just generally help us out. So if you're interested in this, reach out to us via LinkedIn or one of the other methods that are on that QR code, which you'll see again at the end of the seminar. I think that might be it for me.
Just one thing to add. On the position, it is a volunteer position, and you do need to be a UCSD alumni to have a leadership role on the council. Thank you, Brian. It is my pleasure to welcome George Scott as our guest speaker today. George is president of SIDEARM Sports, a company that powers the digital presence of more than 1,600 athletic programs, including most of the Power 5 conferences and over 240 Division I schools, including UCSD. In an environment where fan engagement, digital experiences, and data-driven content are the name of the game, SIDEARM plays a significant role in helping collegiate athletic programs connect with fans and manage their digital operations. Before joining SIDEARM, George spent more than 12 years with the NFL, where he led digital, social, and mobile strategy across the NFL's network of club sites. And before that, he served as Chief Operating Officer at CBS Interactive's Collegiate Sports Division, overseeing over 200 collegiate digital sports properties. We are honored to have him here today. And what makes this conversation especially interesting is that George isn't here to talk about future possibilities or what if we did this in our companies. He's leading an organization actively navigating AI adoption right now. He made a deliberate strategic decision to get every employee AI certified to accelerate this shift. And he's here to take us behind the scenes of that journey, what they did, what worked, and what surprised them. And with that, George Scott, over to you.
Thank you, Sandra. Appreciate it. And just so everybody knows, because it's not in my bio, I am a torero. However, before you start to dislike me, SIDEARM does the UCSD Triton's website. So UCSD is in addition to getting to do this today, you are also a client, which is great. So let me share my screen here. Sandra already gave a great introduction of SIDEARM and what we do. So let me see. We've got a little agenda here about who we are, what's at stake for us in terms of AI. And I got asked this question the last time I did one of these. What's at stake? Everything, right? Why AI is non-negotiable for us. And if you're a student, an individual, I want to make sure this applies to you as well. I'll go through our playbook about what we did, when we got started, and then talk about how you keep that going. Because one of the challenges you run into with an initiative like AI is there's an initial spike in excitement, enthusiasm, and passion for it. You have to keep that going. We'll talk about what's changed in our business, how we think about risk, and throughout the way, I've got a couple of examples that I can share here as case studies that, just in full disclosure, I had to take out any real data and school names just because of proprietary information. So you'll see what is basically a real case study, but with some of the data anonymized. All right, so Sandra talked about who we are. I appreciate you mentioning Power 5. There's that Pac-12 that's sort of on the fringe that makes the 4 or 5. We have about 80% of the Power 4, Power 5, which means when you think about the biggest money-making sport in collegiate athletics, football, we've got 80% of those big football and a lot of the basketball powerhouses. That said, we do 1,600 websites and sometimes apps. And when you think about AI and just the amount of work that goes into that, when I walked in the door in November of 24, that was a staggering number. As AI starts to bolster our business, I start to think about that differently and say, how can AI help me to continue to support 1,600 websites at scale? And we reach about 100 million fans annually. So the other thing you should know about SIDEARM is what I walked into was very much informational websites, right? And we were software as a service. It's very much DIY. Here's your software, here's your website, here's your app. If something breaks, we will be right there to fix it. We're very good at being reactive and supportive, but we want to be strategic, right? And what we want to ask of our clients is, what are your brand objectives? What are your business objectives? And what are your fan objectives? And if you can tell us that and tell us what success looks like in those three areas, we'll come up with a digital strategy that will help you meet your goals. What's so amazing about AI and where that's going is I've had to restaff and transform the organization, but layering AI on top of that as a strategic partner is really extremely helpful. Now, the other thing is we can't wait because just like UCSD, right? So you have an AI program that I think launched in the fall of 25. Syracuse, every single student, faculty member, and staff has a Claude license and is empowered to use Claude. Florida committed 50 million to AI infrastructure. What that means is our schools are constantly asking us, George, what are you and your team doing about AI? How are you leveraging AI? And we know that their EDUs are far advanced from a lot of businesses out in the world. So we can't be sitting back and waiting. We have to be leading the charge. So just a little bit of why it's non-negotiable for us. Fan engagement, right? How do you create a tighter, more personalized connection with the fan? There's a lot of ways to do that, but AI-enabled connections is just a much more optimal way to do that. How do we deliver products and features faster? Again, we have 1,600 clients, right? And every football season is a watershed event. Like there's new features, there's new third-party plugins, there's new product. And in order to be able to ship that on time, AI will help us deliver more products, more features faster. One of the things I'm really excited about, and I actually think there may be a couple of attendees here from my BI department, but is what we've been able to do with analytics, which has really been transformational in terms of how quickly we can not only get data, analyze data, and tell the story behind the data, what's working, what's not. And then finally, content at scale, right? Schools, a lot of schools have 30 plus sports. I think Harvard has 40 plus. I think they have 41 sports. It's very difficult for a small group of people in the sports information department to pump out content, even game recaps or just press releases across 30 to 40 sports. So we want to enable them to do things faster and more efficiently. Now, if you're an individual, right, and this I would say to my employees, I say it to them all the time, AI literacy is, if not now, in a month, in 3 months, in 6 months, you are going to go on a job interview and you are going to be asked about your AI literacy and your AI proficiency. In the same way that if you were a finance professional, they would ask you, how competent are you in Excel? It's not, and if you say, I don't know how to use Excel, that you're not getting the job, right? I don't know how to do pivot tables, you're not getting the job. And so my point there is AI is sort of eating the world. And if you're not embracing it, it's going to be a challenge for you at some point. Whether you stay where you are, whether you move on, I can tell you that my company is quickly transforming because of AI. And this has become sort of a tired saying, but it's worth repeating. AI isn't going to take people's jobs. People that know how to use AI are going to take other people's jobs, right? So we look at AI as really optimizing what our staff does, not replacing it. And again, the third thing for you as individuals, while you may not be required to do this yet, you may be doing it for fun. Wouldn't you rather get ahead of it and self-teach, learn? You can take courses on LinkedIn Learning. You can take a school like Section, which is what we used. You can have Claude teach you AI. Like there's a lot of different ways to do that. So I want to talk a little bit about our journey and how it started. And it goes back to what I said about our schools and our EDUs. We cannot sit back and let our schools be first and tell us and be the experts. I felt very strongly that if the school asked us, what are we doing about AI? before we get to the third-party technologies, the internal mechanisms we're using, what I felt was critical is that across my 100+ people, that they were all AI proficient. I want to be able to walk in the door at UCSD, Florida, Texas, Ohio State, and when someone starts to talk about AI and say, George, what are you doing about AI? I can say, every single person on my staff has been through a basic and an expert level of proficiency. It is part of their performance review. It's 20% of their performance review. It is a mandate that they finish this training, and we are encouraging and celebrating that behavior, which we'll talk about in a minute. So the company mandate was in December, we got a license to a school called Section, an enterprise license. We set up a timeline and said, you have until April 30th to complete all this training. And the training is probably amounts to somewhere between 12 and 16 hours of coursework. And then there's supplemental materials you can do. It's not a tremendous amount of work, but we had to monitor that. We had to reward people. Sometimes we had to punish people a little bit and just say, hey, you need to get going on your training. This is important. And as a management team, I made sure I was the first one done with the training. I made sure I was the first one to be proficient. Not because I have a ton of time as a president, not because I will say I'm passionate about it, but because I felt like I needed to lead by example and get it done. My management team quickly followed suit. And so we all completed this well ahead of that April 30th timeline. So we had the section training, talked about that. And then the other thing we rewarded people with is once you finish the training, you became eligible for a Claude team license. And so we're not going to give you a license if you're not willing to do the training and put in the time to use, and this is very important, to use AI safely, to use it responsibly, and to make sure that you're not leaking company data. So that was the process that took place through May. Where we are now is last month, we launched an AI committee that consists of cross-department. We've got, it's not just techies. We've got devs, we've got marketers, we've got customer support, partner development, all sorts of different disciplines are represented there. We are very fortunate in that we have our head of BI, who I would characterize as somebody who really gets AI, who's super passionate about it, and who just digs in full force. And so she is our AI chair. You really need somebody like that to chair a committee like this, someone who's constantly ahead on Claude Code and Claude work and everything else that we're doing. Now, where our AI committee is going is not just celebrating the wins, sharing the use cases, which I'll show one to you in a second, but making sure that we're building out proof of concepts, that when we build out those proof of concepts, that we're then measuring them to say, are these making a difference in the work we're doing? And then finally, when we get into kickoff, which is August, September, and beyond for the fourth quarter, the goal is really putting those use cases to work at scale, right? And so I think the same thing should apply on a personal level. Give yourself a deadline to get educated, right? I want to be a responsible user. I want to learn a particular skill. I want to expand my horizons and learn to code. Whatever those things are, wherever you are in your journey, set a deadline for yourself to get stronger. So a little bit about how we keep up the momentum, at least in the company, because I mentioned there tends to be a spike. It's a little bit like Pokemon Go. Maybe some of you are too young to remember that. Big spike and then interest wanes. So we have a Slack channel where people say, hey, I just did X, Y, or Z, right? And I want to share it with everybody. We have a monthly spotlight where we will publish these use cases via Slack at the all hands meeting. We just did an all hands meeting today. And so I do have an example I'll share. We've got the AI committee, and then we've got the continuous education. So a lot of people use SkillJar to continue their Claude education. I'll mention here too, for those of you that use Claude, we are mostly a Claude shop, but I'm wary of becoming too dependent on Claude. And so I encourage you, as I've encouraged myself, to make sure that I've got a Perplexity license, I've got a Gemini license, and I've got a ChatGPT license. So I'm trying to make sure that while Claude seems to be ahead for businesses like ours, that we're not becoming dependent just on that one tool. So here was a use case from today by our Director of Client Support, Josh Hazard, that we shared and celebrated at the All Hands. So what some of you may not know, what an S1 is a severity 1 outage. So that means the Triton's home screen is down, video's not working, like something serious on the home page or during a big football game, a big basketball game is either crashing or is not operable on the website. And so that is a fire drill for us, right? So what we've done with AI Assist here is a lot of times the question is this an S1 or not? And there's a triage process that takes place to say, is this truly an S1, right? Where is it occurring? Is it occurring on one school or multiple schools? How long has it been going on? This ingests that and helps us determine whether it's actually an S1 or not. Then Claude is gathering context saying, to my point, hey, this is an S1 because it's not just UCSD Tritons. There's 7 other schools. It's on the home screen. According to our service level agreement with our clients, this should be deemed as an S1. It creates an internal Zoom link so that we can all jump on the call and triage, and it details the affected systems. Confluence is a tool we use. You may not be familiar with it, but just think of it as an internal tool where we would gather information and documentation. So it's documenting it there so that someone doesn't have to go in there and create a ticket. It's going to post the Slack alert, right? Which George is going to get. And for my employees that know me, George is going to react. So they better be one step ahead of me. But it's going to say, hey, everybody, all hands on deck. We've got a serious outage. And also we're addressing it. Then you're going to get live updates and then we're going to iterate to refine the process. So this is in the early stages. But what I just described to you, imagine that a human being is having to say, okay, one of our sites is down. Let me go look and test some other sites to see if they're down. Okay, now I've got to write up a summary, right? And say, okay, these 7 schools with these URLs are down, blah, blah, blah. Now let me post that in Slack. Let me set up a Zoom link. The amount of manual work that this saves is monumental, right? And look, we don't have S1s often, and we don't like to, but they're a given in our business. Sometimes it's an S2. But I can tell you that every time we go through this process, that whole thing from seeing it to triaging it can take a couple hours. And so what this does is it raises the stakes up front so that we can really look at the issue and not have to worry about all the context. What actually changed when we got serious about AI? And this is when we got through the training, we started getting people licenses, and we really started leaning into it. So the first and probably most obvious is that engineering is able to ship features faster, right? It speeds up what you're able to do. There's automation you can create. There's replication you can create. And it helps power that layer of what we call partner intelligence. You might know it as business analytics or business intelligence. It helps that layer. Claude design, I should probably call this Figma to Claude, but because last time I said, everyone said, oh, Claude's going to wipe out Figma. If you're familiar with Figma, you can now take a Figma design and you can place it in Claude. And for us, we can have an app release ready page in a couple of hours. That's something that would take days, weeks in the past, right? Now, the reason I put Claude design is because now Claude is saying, hey, we can do the same thing and you don't even need to use Figma. Just do it right here in Claude and we'll turn it into a production ready format. I always tell this story about my business intelligence team. Amy, who runs my business intelligence team, and also happens to be our AI chair. So again, I'm very fortunate there that she's really leaned in, probably more than anyone else in the organization. Her and Rebecca, who works for her, have really leaned into AI. She said, look, I've got 2.5 people and we're hiring another person. So she'll have 3. But she said, the amount of work that you're asking me to do would take a team of 8 to 10 people if we didn't have Claude Code and Claude Work. And I'm going to show you an example, again, a dummy example of what that does. Gamma, I know Sandra is not a huge fan of Gamma. Gamma is a presentation tool. There's a lot of presentation tools out there. We tend to like Gamma better than the rest because we've been able to theme it in our colors, our logos, and everything. What I love about Gamma, though, and the example I'd use is every month we do an all hands. And each department participates in an all hands, which means our design team is getting, or our marketing team is getting slides from about 12 different people. And as you can imagine, you get a slide from an engineer, it looks very different than a slide from George, a slide from someone in customer support. And so we ended up with this very Frankenstein-y looking deck every month. With Gamma, basically, someone can send Elizabeth, who puts these together, a screenshot, a cocktail napkin, a piece of paper, like you name it, and we're able to turn around a deck for the all hands that looks very much the same every month and is standardized in theme and format in about an hour. So it saves a tremendous amount of time. Think about all those people putting together PowerPoints, then the poor person that has to consolidate the PowerPoint. And finally, around KPI monitoring, Amy, our business intelligence person, is creating KPIs across the organization. So when I talk about business intelligence with our schools, it's how are the UCSD Tritons doing? How many fans are engaging in their website? How long are they spending? Et cetera, et cetera. This is more, what are our KPIs internally? What's our retention rate? How are we doing against revenue? How many tickets did we triage at the Power 4, Power 5 level this month? And being able to get a real good glimpse of that, not just on a monthly basis, perhaps on a daily or a weekly basis. So what I've got here, and again, this is SIDEARM University, so it's not a real school. These are real numbers from a real school. This is a report that a year ago would have probably taken my team a week or two to put together. And the full report, which I'm not going to walk you through, is probably about 14 pages. I was headed to a university on a Wednesday night, and I was sitting with my head of BI, and I said, oh my God, I forgot to tell you, I'm at such and such school tomorrow, and I need some data. And she said, don't worry, I'll get it done for you. I'll do it tonight. What time do you need it tomorrow? So I drove from here to the airport, from my office at the airport, and I got on the plane and I was worried about it. And so I said, hey, I just want to remind you, don't forget about me. She said, oh, you need to check your email. And I already had the report. Not only do I have this report that you see here, which creates recommendations. And by the way, she's gone in and built the recommendations or the parameters herself. So we know what we're looking for. We know what good looks like, as opposed to having Claude tell us randomly, oh, here's a great data point, right? We know what good looks like. And so we're working through this saying, here's the kinds of things that we're looking for that we want to see you doing more of. So you see here, you've got things like how many app downloads do you have? How many monthly active users, weekly active users? What are the numbers saying? What are they telling me, right? What does it mean that we have 51,000 users and we grew 26%? Is that good? Is that bad? Push notifications, which are a very important part of our business. What's your opt-in rate? We would say 47.6% is a pretty good opt-in rate for pushes, but that's also something that we can acknowledge and say, hey, you can do better there. And then just performance by sport, like what types of push notifications are people opening? And how does that dictate what we do going forward? So there's a lot of data here I won't belabor. Here's sort of, comparisons. Schools are very competitive. So if I were SIDEARM seeing this, I'd say, What do I need to do to be stickier in the app, right? And that's the kind of question we want. Okay, great. We have a solution for that. Bigger point about this than just the numbers that I'm sharing here is that think about football season. If I wait a month or I wait till the end of the season to make recommendations to a school, we've missed the window. Now I can ask Amy on a Sunday, how did such and such university do yesterday? And what can we do better next week? What can we inform them that will help them do better next week? That is a game changer. So just a little bit about how we think about AI and risk, right? So there is a balance between people and AI. There's what you all know as AI slop. I can spot AI slop in a heartbeat, and you might spot some in here because I had sort of rushed this deck. So there may be some AI slop in here, but I will give you my example. I spend 2 hours a week putting together my agenda for my boss, the chief strategy officer of Learfield. And I use AI to do it. So you might say, how much time were you spending before you used AI? Probably 30 minutes. The reason I now spend 2 hours is I'm using Claude as a thought partner. And so we're really thinking through what are the things that my boss, what are the opportunities? What are the red flags? What are the risks? What are the decisions that I need his help in making? And by the way, how does this frame my week and what I should be focused on? That's an example of really using that people plus AI balance where I'm spending more time, but I've seen my boss several times. He's sitting there with a paper cup and he goes, this is really good, right? So I'll keep doing it. I think, again, measure before you scale. There's a lot of use cases. I can tell you in our business, people get really hung up on the quickest win is going to be customer service, right? Where your customers are going to reach out and you're going to use AI to scale. That's not always the case. You kind of have to vet that out and say, is that the right use case? Or is there something else that would have a better return? So you don't want to go all in on something until you've been able to measure it. Govern everything, right? One of the reasons we want to get everybody on a corporate license is because free licenses can be dangerous, right? Depending on your privacy settings, depending on how those are getting managed. And so we want to make sure that everyone that has a tool internally is locked down so that they're using it safely and we're not running the risk of having proprietary information out in the market. I've said this before, you don't give someone a car without a driver's license, right? AI is just as dangerous as a car, if not more, from a company standpoint and a privacy standpoint. And then I think stay aware of dependencies. I'm probably older than most of you. I do remember back when I was at the NFL in sort of 2010 to 2012, and Facebook was all the rage. And all of our football clubs were going all in on Facebook. And Facebook could make an algorithm change like that. And all of a sudden, your business model around social media was not what it was before. So this is where I mentioned, I think Claude is great and we're all in on Claude, but there may become a time when Claude tokening is too expensive or they make changes that don't work in our favor. So we want to be AI collaborative, but we don't want to be AI specific partner dependent. And so last thing here, and then we can take some questions, is just how I went through this. Is I mentioned at the outset, like leadership went first, and that started with me. If you're going to expect people to do this, you have to do it first. I think there's a lot of CEOs out there that are saying, we need to be first in AI, but do they actually know what they're talking about? I don't want to be that guy. I need to stay ahead of my team. And I'm also a little competitive, which Sandra doesn't know about me yet. But so I'm going to try to do that anyway. But I think it's important. And I think you as an individual should think about staying ahead of your peers. If you're a student, if you're in a job, you should be competitive and think about staying ahead of your peers because it's changing so quickly. I think the other thing we've learned is that timeline I gave of December 15th, you have until April 30th. In retrospect, I wish I'd squeezed that and said, you got 60 days. And then the last thing is, I think that 8 to 10 hours initially of really regimented, structured learning will change how you use and think about these tools.
Wow. Well, George, thank you so much for this rare inside look at how you and your teams are actively navigating AI adoption every single day. And we have several questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. First question. This sounds very interesting, especially the idea of weekly updates on the Slack channel. However, I did have one question. Where do we draw the line of working with AI versus becoming extremely reliant on it?
Yeah, I think that goes back to governments and having a committee is how do you make sure that you're not overly dependent on things or you're, again, I bring up the customer service thing, and there's multiple real world examples out there. For the person who asked the question, if you look up Klarna, which is that sort of payment plan, and their journey with AI, I think they went all in on customer support and then had to dial it back a bit. So it's a really good question. That's where I think a committee and a level of governance and a level of visibility helps make sure you don't go over the edge there.
And I'm just going to add to that, George. I think becoming AI literate is understanding how AI works. So you can spot things like inaccuracies and hallucinations, and
Yep.
you start to develop an intuition. That's part of becoming AI fluent, if you will. So it's a learning curve where there's not that many experts yet, right? The workforce is in a huge transformation. So great question, but that's where the learning is so critical.
Right. Agreed.
Let's see. Okay, another question. How did you prep employees for this AI certification? I know you went over this a little bit, but go into maybe a little more detail for this.
Well, yeah, look, we're also a digital company. So in my lifetime, like transformation and adoption and change, I went from Sandra and I talked about this. We're two of the first people we know that in 1998 were building e-commerce sites. Like that was not a thing. Buying things online was not a thing. So I've seen the rise of the smartphone and social media and all of those different things. But when you're a digital company, you sort of embrace this stuff. So when I told people that we had a tool, like literally everybody was like, when can we get our hands on that? And then again, because of safety, we had to authenticate these accounts through our IT department. And that got me held up for a couple of weeks. So people were genuinely banging on the door saying, when can we get into this tool? And so we got a 2-week break for Christmas. And I had the tool, the master tool that showed me what people were doing. We had a guy who watched like 48 hours of video between Christmas and New Year's on AI, classroom video on AI. And so that was what I brought up. There was a lot of enthusiasm. And then you got to a point in January, you said, oh, this is great. 60% of our people are almost there. And then there's people that haven't even opened the tool since December. So that was where we had to use a little bit of the stick to say, look, this is part of your performance review. This is not optional.
All right. Well, this a little bit addresses the next question, which is how did you deal with the naysayers? And motivating them, maybe.
Yeah, we didn't have anyone who said, I'm concerned about these dirty data centers that are polluting the environment, or I'm concerned about Big Brother, like those sorts of things. I think what we ran into, and I'll tell you how I dealt with this, is a lot of people would say, oh, yeah, you don't understand. I'm so busy. I just got back. I'm like, look, I'm the president of SIDEARM, and people that know me here know I work harder than anyone. This job is a passion for me. My kids are grown. I'm traveling all the time. I said, look, I'm doing it. And this is where we had to do a little bit of I actually used Gamma to create a slideshow that I shared. It was sort of a comic, and it was sort of meant to be a joke, but it was about this guy named Sterling, and he went to Harvard, well-educated, great background, and he's in the interview, and at some point the guy says, what is your level of AI proficiency? His head sort of explodes like the thought bubble of Buzz's head. He's like, oh my God. And he can't answer it, and he doesn't get the job. And that was my point about, look, don't do this for me. Don't do this for SIDEARM. Do this for yourself. Because if you think that 6 months from now, you're going to go looking for a job and you haven't done this work, you are putting yourself at tremendous risk.
Yep. Hey, George, one suggestion, maybe stop sharing screen. So I
Oh.
think the conversation probably,
Yeah, sorry.
unless we need to jump back to one of the slides
no, we're
for
good, we're good.
illustration. Okay,
Sandra, can I ask a follow-up to that question?
absolutely, please.
Yeah, George, I mean, it's not going to be universally true, but it might be reasonable to assume that some of the younger participants who are coming out of college might be more AI fluent than some of their colleagues who've been working for 30 or 40 years. What advice do you have for leading up the chain of command in terms of maybe the new kids on the block have some AI
Yeah.
literacy and they want to implement some stuff, but they're getting pushback from their management or even from their senior management?
Yeah, and by the way, I don't appreciate you assuming that I've been working for 40 years, even though I have. But I'm kidding. But yeah, I think that's, and I think, like, if you look back at social media, and I was in sports at the time, the people that were succeeding in social media, and actually the people that were succeeding in sports is a very difficult career to break into, and it's a bit of a good old boys network, good old girls network, but there's people that just, they stay in sports forever. And so when you enter, you're sort of stuck at the bottom. The people that started to rise to the top were the young social media people. Now, why did they get hired? A lot of times they got hired because they were very good at their own social media, right? And so the Chicago Bears, the Dallas Cowboys say, wow, you've got an amazing portfolio. You've had a couple jobs. Why don't you run the Dallas Cowboys social media? Those people were able to sort of parlay those into much either bigger roles within the organization or bigger roles elsewhere. And so I think if you're young, again, anyone who's younger is just going to be much more proficient, much more look, it takes a lot for me to sit down and say, I'm going to work on Claude coding today. If you're a 19-year-old student at UCSD, that's probably second nature for you. So I think you want to learn all you can, and then you've got to surface that in the right way, but to say, hey, I've got something here that potentially could help. I will tell you, just as a real world example, we don't have this person anymore, but we had a person on our BI team. He is a part-time guy, former baseball player at St. Mary's, 23-year-old kid who was doing stuff that was blowing us away. And we were saying, do more of it with AI because he was so proficient.
I'm going to layer onto that. I think there's also a fearlessness that that's inherent. Whereas I think a lot of, sorry, but yes, I'm a late career, but I've always been product management DNA. I'm always looking for the next technology, fearless. But there's a fearlessness in not worrying how you're judged in a generation that's been raised with just out in public digital natives. So I find that to be an interesting perspective as well. There's just a fearlessness to delve in and not worry about mistakes, which is a fantastic development in many generations now of the fail fast culture. I love that. Another question here. How are you using AI within some of the workflows for your customers' benefit within the use of your websites and applications? How are you creating improvements within their workflows?
Yeah, so we approach that twofold. And I think there's another question in there that this probably partially answers is, and this is akin to our business. With any new feature, I have to make a decision. Do I build it? Do I buy it? Do I partner on it? And I think with AI, there's things there's things where we can take Claude, for instance, and use Claude Code or use Claude Work to build out work streams. Then there are fan-facing tools, like we're working with an auction partner that not only creates auctions for an autograph ball, a non-autograph ball, a game-worn jersey, but hey, here's an experience. Bid on 4 pregame sideline passes for this football game. It's all AI driven. right? So all you need is the picture of the ball. It will put the ball in the arena. It will put the jersey in a locker room next to the football stadium. It will write all the copy. It will even say, okay, based on the last 3 auctions, here's the right starting price for this. We're doing the same for gamification. And then we work with a partner that does AI content creation. So what's different about that, we could go to our partners and say, hey, we figured out a way for you to use Claude and prompting to write articles. What this tool is this tool is built for journalists to say, I've got an idea for a story, but I need it optimized not only for digital, but for a newsletter, for social media. Maybe I need a vertical video clip. Maybe I want to take my coach's 45-minute presser and I want this tool to pull out the 3 best sound bites and post tweets and vertical video and all that. So a lot of the content creation tools, we don't want to build that. We're not, it's too easy to go out there and get it. And so to me, it's a little bit of twofold. I think the things that we're focused on are things that work at scale. So for instance, creating better, more detailed analytics reports, right? Creating and manifesting faster code, faster native products, automated QA, things like that. That's what we're most interested in. There's so many companies out there doing amazing things with AI. And as a large company, it's better for us to just partner with them.
Great, thank you. Let's see, another question. Is it worth it for a company to try to develop their own AI tools, or more cost-effective to use the tools already out there with subscriptions? I seen my company develop their own for security reasons, but almost no one uses it.
Yeah, again, I think like, so our idea of developing tools, aside from the Claude Code, is like what Amy does is she develops skills. And so she's developed a lot of skills. And so she's gone from a few months ago, Indiana won the national championship. And I said, can you create a report for me that's meaningful but digestible, like that I can show to an executive at Indiana University? And that was the onus of now, hey, Amy, I forgot to tell you, in an hour, I'm going to be at Texas Tech and I need a report. And she says, oh, I'll have it right over. That's where writing and honing skills works best. And you don't write the skill and stop. You iterate on the skill.
And to add to that, I mean, a lot of the companies are building their own internal applications based on the tools that they have subscriptions to. So once you have an enterprise application, for example, you want that closed, secure environment with a subscription to a larger knowledge set, but then you want to create your own MCP with your own data so that, for example, customer service, the questions are being answered on the technical knowledge of your world, not relying on an LLM to go out there and maybe hallucinate. So I think the blend is critical, and these tools that George is using in his team in Claude Cowork and Claude Code are making that so accessible that you can, I mean, if people aren't using what's in your company, it's pretty easy to make it a beautiful UI that's more functional without much development effort, no big product management project for engineering. It's pretty easy to fine tune this stuff.
Yeah, we're huge fans of like Claude projects, Claude context, shared projects, because that's where you tend to get all that knowledge-based stuff. So my SIDEARM project, for instance, has every important artifact, and sometimes I go through there and I cull, but like when I talk about putting together my one-on-one for my boss, I've got all my artifacts in there. So for me, like just like, look, I'm president of a company, so I'm going to use these things a lot differently than you are. But what I'm constantly looking for is context, right? And thought partnership and devil's advocate to say, okay, like I've got a big meeting coming up. What do we already know about this? So that's that sort of like MCP, whatever you want to call it, is very useful. And especially when you think about that at company-wide.
We have another question. This is from one of our past student speakers. You talked about being ahead of peers in today's world, but now since everyone has access to AI, how exactly do we make ourselves stand out? I have a ton of answers to that question, but George, let's hear your perspective first.
I think that goes back to how we started this, which was, I looked back in December and said, and I just mentioned, like, there's 3 companies we're working with that do AI, and we could have stopped there. And school says, "How are you working with AI?" Well, I got 3 companies I can partner with, but I wanted to be able to say everyone on my team is proficient, and so the whole idea of the AI committee is really to keep pushing us to say, like, you're asking the right question, which is Andy Grove, who was former CEO of Intel many years ago, had a saying which is only the paranoid survive. And so we have to stay paranoid that if we're not pushing the envelope in AI, one of our competitors will. Like my CEO of parent company asked me one day, he said, "George, here's what I want to know. How long does it take before one of our schools just uses AI to create their own website and it's game over?" And I said, "I don't know, but what I'm trying to figure out is how long does it take us to create a site using AI completely from scratch?" Like, if I know that, then I can answer your second question, but I can tell you I'm going to figure it out before they do, because this is my business.
Excellent. Well, I do a bunch of trainings around this, but I'm also working on one that is the future workforce and the skill sets that are needed. So I'm going to share that as I develop that. Maybe we'll even do that in one of your perspective series, Brian. But there are so many resources to learn out there for free. But Vidant, I mean, you in particular are pretty knowledgeable, right? You've created a project, you've used the tools, and if you, in today's kind of more how you can stand out with this is, I know that, as you are doing resumes and getting information in front of companies, making sure that you list the tools that you've used, because even if they're not common tools, I think it's important. And the AI scanners, they pick this up. It's not just I've used it, but what tools? If you list those, that kind of helps you stand out in some of these AI algorithms that are searching. And then, of course, just anybody who hasn't really delved into this yet, there are so many resources out there, including your own AI. You want to learn something? How do I build a skill in Claude Code? You can ask OpenAI, you can ask ChatGPT, and it's going to give you a step-by-step and be the most patient teacher ever. There's no excuse for not learning anymore. And those of you who haven't delved in, you're going to be thrilled and delighted. You're going to love this. And those of you who have, know what I'm talking about. You can take it as far and fast as you want. Brian, I'm gonna did you want to add something to that? And then maybe we do a perspective series on this coming up?
I don't know that I have anything to add, but I think it's a great idea. So we should, talk in the background about getting that set up, I think.
Okay, great. Let's see. How are we on time? We have
About out of it.
Oh yeah. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for your time, for your energy, your good questions. And we would love to follow on with how to build your skill set and what it can help you stand out in the future and what the workforce needs. Thank you, George. Your expertise is such a value to all of us. I really appreciate you sharing that inside look.
Well, thanks for having me, everybody. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks
Bye, y'all.